Hi everyone, it's Grace. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for your support and feedback in last week's video where I explained why I think the moratorium extension to October the 3rd will be the trigger for the market crash in 2021. To check out that video, click here. There are still many questions left unanswered. Many of you asked, what is the basic difference between the 2008 crash and the 2021 crash? Why would there still be a crash even under low housing supply? When exactly will it come, how big it is, and which part will go wrong? So in this video, I will answer all those questions. Before we begin, remember to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and click on the bell button so you get notified immediately when new videos are uploaded. The biggest doubt that people have in many hot real estate market is that with low supply and high demand, there won't be a crash. So let's take a look at where the high demand and low housing supply come from. Number one, much of 2020 see true growing demand and lower supply. First of all, there is no doubt that part of the demand really comes from people who have the need and cash to purchase, because COVID-19 reshuffles the national real estate market and the migration pattern. There are 5 shifts to keep in mind, from north to south, west to east, high tax state to low tax state, city to suburb, and smaller to larger space. I made a video before about the post-COVID real estate market and design trend. To check out the video, click here. The shifts represents people's wish to become homeowners sooner, prevent from COVID infection, and have a safe space to do things that they normally have to do in a public space. Let's take a look at exactly how many people are currently in the market. I will simplify the generations for the purpose of today's discussion. The general trend is that millennials from 25 to 40 who start families start to buy homes. Generation X from 40 to 55 are increasing family size and changing smaller to bigger homes and purchasing rental properties. Baby boomers from 55 to 65 are getting ready to retire, selling bigger homes and moving to smaller homes. For the total household number, I will use the 2019 data before the pandemic hit and the Federal Reserve's policy of quantitative easing to give a more accurate analysis. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, there are 128 million households. Roughly 32 million are millennials, 31 million are Generation X, and 24 million are baby boomers aged 55 to 65. They represent the majority of the economic production force and are actively in the housing market. And since the pandemic hit at the beginning of 2020, the already somewhat low mortgage rate continued to go lower. According to Freddie Mac, back in January 2nd, 2020, the primary mortgage rate was 3.72% for a 30-year fixed. As of August 19, 2021, it went all the way down to 2.86%. So with continuously decreasing low mortgage rate, the number of people buying homes started to pick up during this time. So the demand rushed in as soon as the pandemic hit. So yes, the housing supply in 2020 became lower because of increasing demand, mainly from these 3 generations of buyers. Number 2, starting in 2021, the nature of housing supply and demand changes when price skyrockets. Back in 2020, the price was picking up in a somewhat normal pace. But starting in the first quarter of 2021, the price started to go out of whack. According to CoreLogic's National Home Price Index and Case-Shiller Trends, which measures the housing price change, from January 2020 to January 2021, the price increase rate was roughly from 4% to 9%. And then from January to June of 2021, the price increase rate then all of a sudden jumped from 9% to 17%. So the price increased moderately by 5% over a 12-month period in 2020, while it increased by 8% over a 6-month period in 2021. The pattern of a rent price also skyrockets in 2021. Last year, when the pandemic hit in March, the rent decreased and many places also offer reductions or concessions to attract more renters. Starting this year, the rent suddenly jumped. According to the Zelle Observed Rent Index, the national rental price increased by an average of 8.6% from January to July 2021. There are many places where the rental price jumped by 20, 30, 40%. The sudden jump of housing sales and rental price shows that the market supply and demand are driven by factors other than salaries. Because in the last week's video, we can clearly see that the salaries increase rate cannot remotely catch up with the housing sales and rental price. Number 3, there are more buyers and they have more cash is not an acceptable answer for the sudden jump of home price and rental price. The excessive cash comes from borrowing. Where does all the excessive cash come from? I know you've been talking about the Federal Reserve printing money and a quantitative easing policy. So let's take a look at exactly what the Fed has been doing. Since July 2020, a few months after the pandemic hit, the Fed has been purchasing $40 billion of mortgage-backed securities every month. This increases the money supply and lowers the interest rate so that people can take out more home loans at a lower mortgage rate. This prompts more buyers, which drives up the housing price. As prices increase, existing homeowners are able to build more equity in a very short period of time, sell their homes, and use the funds as a bigger down payment to buy more expensive homes. And the same situations happen to the next buyers who become homeowners and sell their homes. So you get the idea. So the housing bubble grows bigger. Since each homeowner is doing exactly the same thing because of how easy it is to borrow money, so the housing price grows at an unusually fast rate. It seems like a perfect situation because people are getting richer. Then let's take a look at the assets and liabilities of the household balance sheet provided by the Fed in 2019. In the asset part, there are short-term and long-term assets. And residential assets, aka real estate, belong to long-term assets. Here, conditional median value basically means that households with missing assets, either short-term or long-term, are excluded to come up with a new median. So the conditional median value may be higher than the median value without exclusion. And I will be using the Miami real estate market as an example. Let's say an existing homeowner with a conditional median value of $225K worth of primary residence wants to buy a larger home. Say the housing price increased by 30%. So now the $225K becomes $292K. After the homeowner sells the home, repays the mortgage debt of $134K, and deduct $23K of sales and closing costs, which is roughly 8% of the sold price, and use the remaining $135K to get a bigger home. So now the homeowner are able to max out with a 20% down with a maximum total budget of $675K. So when the other homeowner sees the jump in home value and how much they can make out of selling a home, they automatically max out the pricing perimeter. So now 30% is not attractive enough anymore, maybe 40, 50, or even more. So back in 2020, a $675 budget may give you a 5-bedroom home. But in 2021, it may only give you a 3-bedroom home. And now a 5-bedroom home may be worth $800K, $900K, or even more. So this explains why homes are getting more and more expensive. Then let's take a look at each generation's buying power. According to the household median net worth in 2019 provided by the Federal Reserve, 35 or younger have 13K, 35 to 44 have 91K, 45 to 54 have 168K, 55 to 64 have 212K, 65 to 74 have 266K, and 75 or older have 254K. So it shows that the younger the generation, the less buying power there is, and the more debt a household has to carry. And homes become less affordable in 2021 than 2020 because of the price jump. For rental properties, as home values grow, rental prices also increase because landlords need to cover higher PITI, which grows with the home value, so that they can make a profit out of the rental income, because that's the whole point of being a landlord. So say a 3-bedroom apartment cost $2,500 in 2020. Now with a 30% jump in 2021, it costs $3,250. The rising PITI also explains that many landlords actually use mortgage instead of real cash to purchase properties. But for renters whose salary growth are slower, they can only afford so much. What makes matters worse is when younger generation want to save a larger down payment to buy in the future, have children to raise, plus other debts such as student loans, car loans, credit card debt, plus the living expenses that are increasing because of the inflation rate, there's simply no more room to squeeze out of the monthly savings. And as the rental price continues to grow as the home value grows, the situation will only get worse. So when renters simply cannot afford to pay rent anymore, they may urge the local government for rent control. Why is this the case? Because when home values increase by 30%, rent increased by 30%, salaries only increased by 3.5% if in the private sector, as per last week's video data. So you can see that the home price brings up both PITI and a rental price, but there's no extra cash coming from salaries to hold them up. So there's no real cash behind the current housing boom. Existing homeowners generate more cash by transferring the home loans to the next buyers and renters. And the same thing happens to the next buyers and renters, so on and so forth. And it's not just the renters that are suffering from the dilemma. Landlords are also trapped. They either have to bring up the rental price to cover the PITI, or simply break even or suffer a loss by keeping it as the same rental price as before. Number 4, because of easy borrowing, corporates are able to get massively more cash than individuals. And the situation gets worse when corporates are able to change both the supply and demand side of the housing market. Other than the $40 billion of mortgage-backed securities, the Fed also buys $80 billion of Treasury securities per month. This lowers the interest rate that banks borrow from each other and also the interest rate that corporates borrow from banks so that they can invest and expand business. The intention of the Fed is to stimulate the economy by the behaviors of corporates, meaning to do capital investment, hire more people, generate more income, salary, so on and so forth. But does buying Treasury securities generate the desired outcome? Meaning higher GDP, steady inflation rate, and lower unemployment rate? Not exactly. This is not to say that it doesn't work at all. Corporates in the real economy sectors are able to borrow more money at a lower rate to provide more and better products and services and provide more job opportunities. But not all corporates are in those sectors. Some corporates rely on financing, real estate, and other related industries to create more revenues and jobs. You may notice that there are more corporates and institutional buyers coming into the housing market, probably more so than ever before. They actively and more aggressively invest in buildings and communities which are comprised of tens of thousands of homes. Like I said before, because of COVID, people seek bigger space in the suburb areas. So many corporates start to invest in single-family, multifamily homes in these areas, rent them out, and generate rental income as cash flow. Because of the aggressive buying behavior of institutional buyers, the housing supply further tightens, as we see now. Now that the housing price becomes so high, more and more first-time buyers and repeat buyers are not able to compete both in down payment and total budget. So some of them become renters, simply because they cannot afford it anymore. So at this point, part of the housing supply becomes the demand, creating a mystified impression that there are more buyers than homes. Number 5, twisted housing supply and demand breaks the symbiotic relationship between landlord and renter. There is a fundamental difference between the capital behavior and real estate essential. Corporates that hold massive capital are driven by profit maximization and cost minimization, and this is the same across all industries. But the capital behavior does not line up with what keeps the real estate market afloat: landlord and renter symbiosis. The profit of corporate comes from rental payment, which is monthly cash flow. To maximize the cash flow, expenses must be minimized. Normally, renters only have to pay utilities and small fixes because the rent covers the cost of the landlord. But to fit into the corporate model, that's not enough. More expenses such as landscape, roof repair, pest control, and other expenses are transferred from institutional landlords to individual renters, because that's the only way that corporates can maximize the cash flow coming from rental payments. So that explains the rental price jump starting in the first quarter of 2021. But here's the problem. Landlord and renter are a pair of symbiotic relationship, meaning that one cannot thrive without the other. No landlord wants a renter that delinquents or doesn't pay rent. And no renter will deliberately not pay rent to destroy his or her own rental history. If rent is kept at a reasonable level, the symbiotic relationship will nurture both the landlord and renter. But this is not what's happening now. As rents continue to go higher, renter savings will be further squeezed. But renters are also people who have families to raise. With the moratorium still in place, it is not impossible that individual renters may at some point aggregately force local authorities to either bring their salaries up to the same level as the increased rent or bring down the rent price through rent control. And here's my take of the business model of home for rent. If rent control kicks in, institutional landlords' profit will be kept, and a return on investment will not be as attractive as before. To prevent from loss, they may start to sell properties as well. So the home for rent business model is not sustainable because it breaks the symbiosis between landlord and renter. Number 6, if 2008 is a high supply crash, 2021 will be a low supply crash, where the renters' aggregate behavior that represents the market demand will be the exact cause. According to the latest data provided by Freddie Mac about the new housing supply in 2008 and 2018, we can see that from 2006 to 2008, the new housing supply is on a decline from over 2 million to less than 1.25 million homes, while the 2018 housing supply is on a climb from below 1.25 million to above. So the 2008 crash is triggered by oversupply, and the 2021 crash will be triggered by renters urging rent control over low supply. Here's the basic principle that explains the cause. Borrowed money always have to be paid back no matter what. The only entity exempt from this rule is the Fed because it holds the power to print money. It is the only entity that is both the debtor and a creditor. Individuals have to repay debt, corporates have to repay debt, banks have to repay debt. So yes, it is time for the Fed to do something to reset the market, or the market will be reset by the market demand, aka renters. So here are my 6 reasons why I think the 2021 market will crash under low housing supply. What do you think? Comment down in the section below about your opinions or solutions because I'm curious to hear about them. In the next video, I will add an interesting aspect about what the Chinese government is doing. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.